The United States military has struck Kharg Island, a 5-mile stretch of land in the Persian Gulf that quietly controls the economic survival of an entire nation. Roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports pass through that single island. Think about that. Not a weapons depot, not a military base in the desert. The crown jewel, the financial heartbeat of the Islamic Republic, just got hit by American bombs. Trump announced on Truth Social that U.S. Central Command executed what he called one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East, obliterating every military target on Kharg Island while deliberately sparing the oil infrastructure. That choice wasn't mercy. That was a message. A loaded gun held to Iran's economic temple, with one finger still on the trigger. Some 2,500 U.S. Marines and an amphibious assault ship are reportedly on their way to the Middle East, and military analysts are now saying the strike pattern tells the real story. The targets destroyed, the runway, naval base, air defenses, mine storage, are exactly what you neutralize before an amphibious assault. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day, about 1/5 of the entire global oil supply. Iran has been choking it, and America just answered. This isn't a headline. This is history, unfolding right now, in real time, with consequences that will touch your gas prices, your economy, and the global order for decades to come. Stay with me, because what happens next is the part nobody is talking about. And look, I want you to sit with that for a second, because what just happened, what Trump just said out loud on his own platform to the entire world, is not a small thing. This is not a tweet about trade deals or border policy. This is the President of the United States announcing that Kharg Island has been bombed. Kharg Island. If you don't know what that is, let me paint the picture for you, because this is where everything starts to make sense in a very uncomfortable way. Kharg Island is not just some dot in the Persian Gulf that you'd skip past on a map. It is the beating heart of Iran's oil export infrastructure. Roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil flows through that island. 90%. So when you hear that it's been struck, you are not hearing about a military outpost getting hit. You are hearing about a nation's economic spine being targeted. And that changes the entire conversation about what this moment actually is. Now, I've been watching this region for a long time. I've watched administrations come and go. I've watched red lines get drawn and then erased. I've watched the same cycle of escalation and de-escalation play out over and over again like a slow-motion drama that nobody ever fully resolves. But this feels different. And I want to tell you why. Because I think if you just consume the headline and move on, you're going to miss the actual weight of what's unfolding. The deployment of up to 2,500 American troops to the Middle East is not a symbolic gesture. That number is specific. Specific numbers in military deployments mean specific planning. They mean logistics. They mean pre-positioned equipment. They mean someone sat in a room and calculated exactly what force posture was needed for a specific range of contingencies. And that should tell you something about how seriously the people making these decisions are taking the situation on the ground. But here's what I keep coming back to, and I want to be honest with you about this, because I think the honest conversation is the only one worth having. The question isn't just what happened. The question is what happens next. Because once you bomb Kharg Island, once you take out infrastructure of that magnitude, you have fundamentally altered the calculus for everyone involved. Iran cannot absorb that kind of strike and simply walk away from it. Not politically, not strategically, not in terms of how the supreme leader maintains authority at home. The regime in Tehran has built its entire internal narrative around resistance, around the idea that Iran cannot be broken, cannot be humiliated, cannot be forced to its knees. And Kharg Island burning sends a very different message. So the pressure on Iran's leadership to respond in some form, through some channel, direct or proxy, is immense. And that pressure doesn't dissipate just because we want it to. And this is where I want you to think about the troops. 2,500 soldiers heading into that region. They are not going there to watch. They are going there because someone assessed that American assets, American personnel, or American partners may very shortly be in harm's way. That's what force projection means in practice. It means you are preparing for a scenario where things get worse before they get better. And the fact that this deployment is happening at the same time as this announcement about Kharg Island tells you everything about the sequencing here. This isn't reactive chaos. Whether you agree with the strategy or not, there is a logic to it. Hit the economic target hard. Move the troops fast. Establish deterrence before Iran has time to coordinate a response. That's the theory. Whether the theory survives contact with reality is the part that keeps serious people awake at night. And I think what gets lost sometimes in the noise of breaking news, in the scroll of notifications and the rush to be first with the take, is the human dimension of what military escalation actually looks like. 2,500 is a number on a screen right now, but those are fathers and mothers and sons and daughters who are being asked to move into a region that is actively destabilizing. The families sitting at home watching this same news, they're not parsing geopolitics. They're looking at that number and doing the math in a very personal way. And I think we owe it to them, honestly, to not reduce this to a political football, to not just ask whether Trump looks strong or weak, to not make it about the next poll or the next press briefing. Because the stakes are real, and the stakes are human, and we should be clear-eyed about that. Now, I also want to talk about the oil markets, because if you think this is just a military story, you're only reading half the page. Kharg Island going offline, even partially, even temporarily, sends a shockwave through global energy markets. We're talking about disruption to a supply chain that the entire world depends on. Europe, Asia, emerging markets, they all have skin in this game, whether they want to or not. And energy prices moving sharply in either direction have downstream consequences that ripple into inflation, into consumer costs, into the kind of economic pressure that governments everywhere are already struggling to manage. So what starts as a military strike in the Persian Gulf lands on kitchen tables in ways that most people won't immediately connect. But the connection is there, and it's direct, and it matters. I also want to flag something that I think is underreported in how we're covering this. The regional architecture around Iran has been shifting for months. The Abraham Accords changed the relationship landscape. The normalization conversations between various Gulf states and Israel, imperfect, complicated, full of tension, nonetheless created a set of alignments that didn't exist before. And what a strike on Kharg Island does is test all of those alignments in real time. It forces every regional actor to decide, right now under pressure, where they actually stand. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, which hosts a major American air base, Turkey, Iraq, which has both American troops and deep Iranian influence inside its borders. Every single one of them is being asked by this moment to clarify their position, and most of them would frankly prefer not to. Because clarity in a moment like this comes with costs, and everyone in that neighborhood knows it. And then there is the question of Iran's proxies, because Iran does not fight conventionally when it is under pressure. It fights through Hezbollah in Lebanon. It fights through the Houthis in Yemen. It fights through Shia militia networks in Iraq and Syria. These are its pressure valves, and they are real, and they are armed, and they have shown in recent years that they are willing to be activated. So when I hear the troops number, 2,500, I'm not just thinking about Iran itself. I'm thinking about the broader threat environment that those troops are stepping into. Because a conflict that starts with a strike on Kharg Island doesn't necessarily stay contained to Iran. It can spread horizontally across proxy networks faster than conventional responses can track. So where does that leave us? Honestly, in a place of serious uncertainty. And I think the honest thing is to sit with that uncertainty rather than pretend we know how this resolves. What I do know is that the decisions being made in the next 48 to 72 hours will matter enormously. The diplomatic channels that are still open, and some are still open, barely, need to be working harder than they ever have. The question of whether there's an off-ramp, a way for Iran to respond that doesn't trigger the next escalation, that doesn't pull in more actors, that doesn't turn a strike on an oil island into the opening chapter of something much larger, that question is being worked right now by people whose names we'll never know, in rooms we'll never see. And that work matters. That work is the thing that stands between a very bad situation and a catastrophic one. And all of us, whether we support this administration or oppose it, should be hoping hard that those people are getting it right.